the people, how well they're being taken care of. And quite honestly, the happier your employees are, the better employees they become. So when the focus turns to, how can we make this a good experience for you? So when we start talking ESG, we're
All right, everyone, welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series brought to you by AKFI Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. Hello, everyone. I'm Isabella, the co-host, and I'm here with Manuel, the other co-host, and also the co-founder of AKFI, here with the guest of today with Alan Williams with us. Hello, Alan.
Hi.
Hello. Very nice to see you on the show.
It is a pleasure for me to be here.
Thank you, Alan. So this talk series brings together great minds to discuss the current state and the future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. Alan has a track record being known as a strategic transformation C-suite advisor and ESG program director. She specialized in the growth of businesses through digital transformation, business process improvement, and ESG and sustainability initiatives. And her articles are being published, among others, on Inc., Technology, the CPA Journal, Small Business Computing, PC Magazine. She's also a member of Forbes Business Development Council. Welcome again, Alan. So great to see you here. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. I'm very excited.
Likewise. So as you put it, the core of all change is the decision to do so. And working with leadership, including C-suites, board members, executives, and managers, you said that the only way to change is to actually make it happen across the organization. So based on your observation and experience, what are your thoughts on the current state of the sustainability, ESG, and digital transformation development? And what do you think of today's trends in those areas?
Wow, that's a big question. So let's take it in pieces. So in general, right, change through digital transformation really has to happen across the organization. It can't just be a C-suite or a leadership initiative. So what I do as the Director of Advisory and ESG programs at Orion is we work with organizations to understand at the C-suite level what their goals and strategies are. But then we include employees from across the organization. We do a lot of interviews and understand their business process, what's working and where improvement can be found. Then working together with the leadership, we develop a roadmap and a digital transformation plan that takes into consideration what we heard so that when it eventually gets rolled out, with continuously communicating to everyone in the organization, very many people at all depths of the organization start to see that their voice was actually heard. And that definitely helps with the adoption and change management. From an ESG and sustainability perspective, certainly there are a lot of regulations that are driving this, but the availability of technology to help with that is just going to help it progress more quickly. In order to understand what your impact is on the planet, the first thing you need to do is understand what your baseline is. And although you can do that via spreadsheets, there are much better tools out there that'll do your carbon accounting for you to enable you to truly understand what your impact is, and then again, work to change.
Thank you.
And to add something, actually, because I think we would prefer to call transformation digital, because the transformation is the process, is the change process, or the transition it's many times the most difficult part, as you already explained, Ellen, because the C-suite can say, "Let's go, we go, let's march," But there is a whole transition process, and actually many studies show that digital transformation has a very low success rate in returning the initial investment, because many times we say digital transformation is technology. Let's move to cloud, let's use AI, let's use IoT, and so on. But we forget, as you said, to bring on the people on board, to reskill them, to train them, to communicate with them. And of course, we also not working hard enough to understand the business model change. Because once you use digitalization and digital processes, the company is no longer the same company. The relationships with the consumers or the clients or the supply chain change dramatically. And these kind of changes are sort of missed in the transformation process. And that's the reason we prefer to call it transformation digital, not digital transformation. It's not about digitalization only.
That's a great point, and we totally agree at Orion. Certainly our approach, and we do find this to be a differentiator in our industry, is people, process, technology, sustainability. And we definitely go in that order. The people are first and foremost where we're going to get our information, what their processes are, and how they're using technology. So I totally agree with you that the implementation of technology is definitely needing to be in alignment with the people and the processes of the organization. It doesn't necessarily drive the transformation, but it winds up being, the element of the transformation that drives the change in the business model, to your point.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. And I think you have a lot of experience at Orion and before Orion with digital transformation. Would you, and with the ESG reporting, with the sustainability implementation inside the companies, as you mentioned, of the C-suite level as well as the middle management levels, would you have some lesson learned to share with us, and of course with the audience? Some interesting cases that, and of course we don't want to use the names of the companies or references, but some cases, some lesson learned that you can share, please.
Certainly. So in the implementation of the Net Zero Cloud, we're finding a range of different approaches within our clientele. So some of the people who are spearheading the initiative in their organizations, where they'll be utilizing the tool and really helping to move the needle, are across the board. Some of them are director of sustainability, really passionate, understand the impact that business can have, both negative and positive. And some of them, we get on a call and they say, I was told yesterday I have to do the sustainability initiative and I'm not sure where to start. So it really does run the gamut. I think businesses are certainly understanding the importance, if not directly from new regulations, then potentially from the additional pressure they may be getting from their employees and their customers. So moving forward with this initiative and leveraging technology to do so is definitely reminiscent of years past. As you said, I've been doing this for quite a while, where the first conversations I was having, unfortunately a few decades ago, were all about, how do I automate? How do I go from paper to computer? And we're seeing the same thing on a slightly different level, where sustainability for those organizations who have started to do at least something, they're working in spreadsheets, right? So it's the same evolution, from spreadsheets to a more sophisticated system that will save them time, give them more accuracy, and also allow them to do what if scenarios and start to create some science-based targets. So it's sort of the same thing. Whenever there's a new anything, right? You're starting with the most basic way in which to accomplish it, and then moving to something that's more efficient, more productive. So we're finding that across the board. And we're also finding accelerated interest recently in scope 3, specifically understanding supplier emissions. So I think companies those that are at least have sustainability initiatives are starting to be comfortable with the carbon emissions that they own, but they understand that they have a responsibility both upstream and downstream of the organizations they do business with. So scope 3 is definitely a conversation we're having in much more detail now, and how to best capture and report on the scope 3 emissions with more accuracy.
And this is very important. And to reinforce exactly what you said, scope 3 is the most challenging because you have to look across your supply chain, and you depend on your supply chain at the end and on their state of digital transformation in order to have accurate data, because you cannot go inside another company and roam through their data lake or whatever, the database. So how do you see this challenge for the companies? How can they overcome this extended communication between, along, of course, the axis of carbon disclosure and greenhouse gases disclosure?
So I think as more and more organizations are working on their own carbon emissions, certainly the conversation is becoming more and more common amongst businesses that work together, right? Mm-hmm. So I may not be a supplier, but for those who are my suppliers, it's not going to be an unusual or surprising conversation or request, especially those that supply much larger organizations who have already started to ask for supplier emissions. So on one hand, companies across the board are taking this initiative, and on another hand, if they're not, they're being asked to by their customers. There are functionalities within the tools, especially the one that we implement, that enable suppliers to actually utilize a portal and deliver their emissions information directly to our clients' implementations. And that's definitely a two-sided sword. So in one way, it certainly helps the customer because the supplier can directly enter their emissions. On the other side, now you have less control over the information. So you want to be able to understand how the suppliers are getting to those emissions results in the first place. And for those suppliers who may not have taken this initiative, the customer may actually have to do a little hand-holding to help the supplier better understand how they can do it and how they can best report on it. And certainly for those customers who take that initiative, not only will they get the information they're looking for, but they will certainly help the supplier be able to deliver that to all of their other customers. And what we also have found, and I suspect you have too, that ESG and sustainability, when you start talking to people in the industry, it's a community more than it is a competitive industry. We were lucky enough to get to Green Biz this year out in Arizona, and I must say, I don't know if it was because it was one of the first in person after the pandemic, or because it was the topic, but everyone was super friendly, and it was really great. It was the easiest networking I've ever done because we're all same reason, and we're all really still trying to figure things out. And so when you really take the initiative to talk to other companies, whether we're giving potential clients references from our existing clients, or we're just talking to someone in an industry similar to a client and making that connection because it just needs to be part of the conversation, building that community and goodwill in the end is, going to help everyone move in the same direction.
So before going to Isabella, I just want to reinforce that this is also the mission statement for the Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, bringing the people together around the table and talk strategy, talk how you put these transformation processes, because it's not only digital, it's ESG transformation. I call it before transition, sustainability transition that you describe it so well in your expose, in your discussion. But it's really very interesting. And you are kind enough to avoid the term greenwashing from upstream or downstream. But to reinforce legislation is coming. We participated in, for instance, responding to the Security and Exchange Commission in the US for regulations that will make mandatory disclosure of carbon footprint as part of the materiality disclosure. We see the same, and I think a little slightly more advanced in Europe already, being close to implementation. So things are getting serious. You can't just fudge the numbers and hope, cross your fingers and hope things will get better. I'll turn to Isabella for the next question.
Sure. I actually very enjoy listening because the conversation is very spontaneous, and I don't have a specific question prepared. I always like to, to dig on based on your previous answer. I just think I think you also kind of reference on that, how fast we're changing today and how the world is evolving. So I think that's one of the critical factor. I wouldn't say the reason, the factor that impact on our decision making, everything, not just even ESG. So as a seasoned, executive advisor, and what's your key takeaway in advising leadership team from enterprise, how they should move forward in such a fast changing digital world with ESG? Let's be more specific. I don't want another big question.
I appreciate that. It really comes down to paying attention to things that I think may have slipped through the cracks over the previous decades. I'm happy to say there's a renewed focus on people, culture, wellness, the importance of taking care of your team, right? Certainly, when my father retired, he had been with an organization for the majority of his career. And we see that as more of something unique than something typical these days. There's a lot of moving around, right, between organizations. And I think the trend really needs to be, and ESG is certainly driving this, a renewed focus on the people, how well they're being taken care of. And quite honestly, the happier your employees are, the better employees they become. So when the focus turns to, how can we make this a good experience for you? So when we start talking ESG, we're thinking about the planet. We're looking at how our organization impacts the community, whether it's local or global. We're looking at opportunities for employees to get involved. We understand that, family first, especially with a people first view of all of our consulting with our clients. The ability to do more remote work where businesses were not so, they weren't embracing it so much prior to the pandemic, and those that needed to pivot just to stay in business and realized remote work could maintain a business and help them be successful. In fact, honestly, at Orion, we grew our team during the pandemic, and found that we didn't have to just hire people within our own geography. And that really opened the door for some excellent talent, because not everyone is located in New York City where we're based. So I would say, the conversations with the C-suite really are around, how do we sustain business? How do we plan for the future to grow? And how do we make sure that we have the right talent in place to do so, whether we need to look for some new talent, but we still have to make them happy, or we need to really shore up and build a stronger culture around the people who've been with us, through some of the challenges that the organization's had over the past few years.
And projecting a little bit more stronger light on the G part, the governance part. I see a lot of pressure actually from Gen Z on companies, especially on consumer goods companies that can sustain. You can see the pressure directly, right? The people buy or don't buy. It's very simple. It's not a B2B to B2C model. It's a B2C. And you see the pressure coming for diversity. You see, very recently, I read an article about Tesla, and people quit ordering Tesla after Tesla expressed their, not Tesla, but Elon Musk expressed interest in buying Twitter, and people were saying, we disagree with Twitter, we see it as bias and so on, whatever perspective they take. But you see this focus on stakeholders that comes back to the companies and comes back to the C-suite, not only in the form of the diversity in the C-suite as well. For instance, countries in Europe now legislate up to 40% women in boards. And frankly, there is a lack of talent because this change happens so fast that there is no time to prepare people. And, the previous treatment of women, which was not exactly nice in companies, happens now that, it reverses itself and they sort of struggle to reach the quotas. So anything you see from your vantage point on the G part, on the governance part, and how this is rapidly changing under digital transformation and ESG, as Isabel also mentioned.
So yes, specifically on diversity, we were working with a client on an envisioning session, understanding their goals and strategies, and we brought up ESG. And they sort of questioned, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, look at the diversity in your organization from the top to the bottom, and how are you approaching that? And they were very eager to say, oh, our HR department, has that under control. And I said, that's great. I said, but what are your hiring practices? And one way that you can help with diversity is when you bring in resumes to remove the candidate's name. So there's no gender bias, there's no other ethnical bias. This is just flat out, the skill set and the presentation of this person without really knowing anything about them, almost like the TV show The Voice, right? Where everyone's back is to the singer and they're just listening to the voice. A similar thing where you're making your decisions on whether this is an appropriate candidate strictly on the skill set and the way in which that candidate is presented. And when we brought that up, it was definitely an aha moment, because you have, unconscious bias that, there's not a lot you can do about that as much as you feel that you are being fair. It creeps in. And so when you can remove that as much as possible, or the ability for that to be part of the decision-making process, it certainly helps with at least the opportunity to be more diverse.
And I'll like to have another hour on this topic because this is also the topic, one of the topics of the many topics in Isabella's Digital Mind of Tomorrow's book. It's very interesting to me that we blame AI for bias instead of blaming the people, because AI discovered the bias or, exposes them, but AI doesn't invent biases. It's not smart enough, as Isabella may agree, at the moment to invent biases about people, but it reflects on the biases in hiring and so on. So, as I said, I wish we have a lot more time. But Isabella, maybe you have a final question.
I have asked. That was a fantastic answer regarding the trends. How should we catch up with the fast changing world? Coming back to people. And I adore that answer. And I hope this message gets shared around more and more through Alan, through us, and through everyone. Start with people, start with human thinking, start with ourselves. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Oh, a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, also thank you to all our audience who tuning in today. And again, Alan, that was wonderful. Thank you for taking the time. And I enjoyed the genuine conversation where you really give us insights, not just, some numbers or some news information. And I really like that, direct way of communication. So thank you for all the valuable.
Thank you very much, and hope we'll see you soon again on the show.
That would be wonderful. And thank you for all you're doing. It's really an important message, because unless we all work together in a couple dozen years, there's going to be a lot fewer of us around.
Hopefully we find a solution to that as well.
With the help of AI. So everyone, make sure you tune in every week for a new episode of Actionable ESG Talk series, where you can gain new perspective on how to mitigate risks and create value by integrating ESG and digital transformation. Until the next one, goodbye from Isabella.
Thank you, and Manuel, and thank you, Ellen.